The title of this message is Safe for a Purpose. Now, summer is gone, isn't it? I wonder whether it ever really arrived. But forgive me now, I'm just going to take us to the world of sport because the sport was great, wasn't it? I don't know whether you got to catch some of the Olympics, Paris 2024. I loved it. I love the Olympics. You find yourself watching sports that you never would otherwise. Found myself watching the synchronized diving and judging their performance and think to myself, what on earth am I saying? Saying that their splash is too big, and yet here I am sat on the sofa. My wife Lydia loved the 100 metres final because that was a sport that she could get behind. It lasted 10 seconds. Now, I don't know whether you noticed, but Paris 2024 happened 100 years after Paris 1924. And there's a story of a Scotsman from Paris 1924 that has captured me. The story of Eric Liddell. I wonder whether you've seen the film Chariots of Fire with that epic soundtrack. Now, Liddell was the son of missionary parents out in China, and he was the red-hot favourite to win gold in Paris 1924. But then he found out that the final was going to be on a Sunday. And he had the conviction that he would not run on the Lord's Day. And so he said no. He said he would not do it. And he was hammered for it. The Olympic Committee, his teammates, could not understand. And yet there was no compromise in Liddell. But what we see in his life is he was driven by a different motive, a different power. His sister Jenny in the film fears for Eric, thinking that all this fame and success is going to go to his head. And Liddell responds with this. I won't try the Scottish accent. Jenny, you've got to understand. I believe that God made me for a purpose, for China. But he also made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure. Now this was the power that drove Liddell. And instead of running the 100 metres, he ran the 400 metre race. And that was not the race he was favoured to win. And yet, with the whole world watching him and his head flung back in delight, the same pleasure that God felt in his training was the pleasure that he felt in his running here in the Olympics. He goes on to break the world record and win the gold. The film finishes there. But his story carries on because Liddell then goes on to China. He gives all of the athletics up to go to China and to go to the north of China, the forgotten, overlooked, dangerous part of China that no missionaries were headed. And yet he went with a conviction that he must take the gospel. And what he found there as World War II started to break into China was that his family had to flee, and yet he had to stay. And he was thrown into Waisan, a prisoner of war camp, filled with disease and rats and terrible living conditions. And yet here and now, without a single eye watching him, this was no longer Paris 1924, this was Waisan in 1945. He would get up every morning. He would read his Bible, he would pray with his friend, and they would go and clean the toilets before anyone else woke up in the camp. He died 5 months before the prisoners were released. And his final words were these: complete surrender. Now his final words, but also his life words, wouldn't you agree? But what is it about Eric Liddell? How could he live a life like this? What was it that made him turn down the gold medal prospects? How could he stick to his convictions despite being hammered for it? How could he then leave it all behind and head to China? How could he lose everything, his wife, his children, suffer in the worst of prisons with his head bursting, and yet still keep his faith and clean the toilets in the morning? What sort of power drove him? Well, I think you see it here, don't you? In his words to Jenny. He knew he was safe. He knew he was loved. He knew the same delight that God took in his running was the delight that he took in him daily. It was the delight he lived in and day out. To live safe is the power, isn't it? The power to take the hammerings, to not need the gold, to go to China and to clean the toilets despite losing everything. Now, life is tough, isn't it? And the Christian life is tough. I heard a friend say it like this to me once. You know the film 4 Weddings and a Funeral? Well, the Christian life is more like 4 funerals and a wedding. There will be more funerals this side of eternity than weddings. More Sands in 1945 than Paris 1924. And so we must ask the question here in Wales, as the church, it's easy, isn't it, for fear to win out, for anxiety to overwhelm. And it can just feel like if we survive, then we've won. But in this time of pressure, in this time of fear and of temptation to give up or to fold, Jesus wants to speak a better word. He wants to make us safe, and safe for a purpose. And that's what we're going to be looking at this morning. We're going to be sitting in John 10, and we're going to look at these words. And I pray that they go on beyond just something we hear, but that they get into the marrow of our bones, that they get inside of us, and they become a power, a reality that we can reorientate our lives around daily, that we are safe and safe for a purpose. So the first point, we are safe. Hear Jesus' words here. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Now just take a moment and let those words sink in. Jesus is saying, I am the good shepherd. I am your protector. I am the one that will live out in the field with you. That's what the shepherds did in Jesus' day. They would live out with the sheep in the fields, ensuring that no lions or bears would touch the flock. They were the protectors. And Jesus says, I am the eye that is on you always. I will not let any lion or bear touch you. I watch over you. I am your protector. And yet, as if that isn't enough, do you hear Jesus' words? He wants to protect us, but also he wants to know us. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. This is the invitation of the gospel. Yes, we are saved from our sin, but also then we are saved for something. What are we saved for? We are saved for relationship. Do you hear it there? I want to know you, Jesus says. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, the same loving relationship between the eternal Father and Son that has existed before the beginning of time and will carry on forever. That same loving relationship, so intimate, so personal, so deep, that it overflowed into the creation of the stars in the sky and of the planets and of people, is the same relationship that we are invited into, the same love Jesus wants us to experience. And how can we? How can we enter into such a relationship? Well, it's through the Good Shepherd, isn't it? It's through the one who lays down his life, the one who on the cross was forsaken that we might not be, the one who cried out on the cross, my God, not my Father, but my God, because he wanted us to be able to call out on our Heavenly Father, the one who was sent outside of this loving relationship, is the one that invites us, made it possible for us to enter into that loving relationship. He was sent out that we could be drawn in. He died on that cross that we might be known as he has been known by the Father. Now, when we think about it, adult friendships are complex, aren't they? Children have a lot to teach us. I love seeing Mally, our little girl, playing in the park, going up to any child that is there and asking, will you play with me today? Will you be my friend today? Just the other day, the two of us were on a walk and she just turned to me and said, Daddy, can I make a new friend today? Children's hearts are so open, aren't they? And yet, if we're honest as adults, our hearts have been broken. If we're honest, to be known, to truly open up, can be a scary thing. And yet Jesus' invitation to us is this: I want to know you. In fact, I already know you. I know everything about you. And instead of running a mile off, which he should do if he were to truly know me, but instead what he does is he comes running after me. He sees the mess. He sees the shame. He sees the pain. He sees the guilt. And instead of running off, he runs towards us. And he says, would you let me in? Would you let me love you? And in today's times of pressure and of overwhelming anxiety, the Good Shepherd longs to make us safe. And so the simple question is have we ever let him in? Just like Mali, have we adopted that posture of, Jesus, will you be my friend today? It's interesting, isn't it? Jesus says, unless we're willing to trust like a child, we will never enter into the fullness of what he has for us. We will never experience the kingdom of God. Are we ready to open ourselves up and to be loved and to be made safe by him? Now we are safe, yes, but safe for a purpose. Hear the heart of the Good Shepherd in verse 16. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. I must bring them also. Jesus knows he cannot settle for some to enter into this kind of loving relationship. He knows it's too good. He longs for the fold to be full. And he says to those on the outside, to those who feel forgotten and left behind and overlooked, Jesus says, I am coming after you to bring you in, to bring you home. And now how will he do that? And this is when things get a little bit scary, isn't it? Because he does that by sending us. We are safe for a purpose. The ones who know his voice, who have heard his voice, are the ones that will go on carrying his voice into the world. The ones that will go outside the fold to bring others in. And so the question is, when it comes to Jesus' must, do we share in his must? Do we share in his passion? Do we share in his compassion? Because when we live safe, that must becomes our own. Now, I doubt you might have seen this show on the TV, The Bear. Lydia and I love it. We watch it on Disney+. And it tells the story, and I won't ruin it for you, of a younger brother who inherits his older brother's broken down, rough around the edges diner in Chicago. And in his brother's honor, he goes and turns it around from being this, dive of a place to becoming one of the best restaurants in the world. Now, I love it for the story, I love it for the characters, but I also love it because I love seeing the food on the show. The food just looks so good. But imagine if I were able to step into the Bear, to enter that restaurant, to taste the food. You think I'm passionate now, having seen the food. Imagine the difference having tasted the food. Now, this is true in life, isn't it? When we taste something and taste it as good, that is when we go on to share it, because we realize this is too good for me to keep to myself. And now Jesus sees the same, doesn't he? When we taste that kind of love, when we enter into that safety, we know then this is too good for me to keep to myself. Passion sends us. The invitation is too good. But I found this on our church planting journey so far in Blaenau. The only thing that can sustain us is compassion, understanding that the need is too great. You see this in Jesus' life. The Gospels record time and time again that Jesus, as he looks upon the crowd, was moved deeply in the deepest part of him, because as he looked out, he saw sheep without a shepherd. He saw a people without a protector. He saw a people without love. He saw a people that were unknown. He saw a people that were not safe. And therefore, because they could not, he must. He had to. You hear the story, don't you, of Jesus saying that the good shepherd is the one that leaves the 99 to go after the one, that nothing or no one will stop him from bringing that one lost sheep home. That is Jesus' compassion. And that is the only thing when things get too overwhelming, when the ground feels too tough, when the pressure to fold comes in, that is the only thing that will keep us going, is having that same compassion. Sheep without a shepherd. Now, Mother Teresa was asked the same question. How can you sustain your mission, your ministry to the poor in Calcutta? And this was her response. Every morning I prayed and asked God to break my heart so completely that the whole world falls in. This is why we will never give up on Blaenau, and I pray this is why we will never give up on Wales. When fear overwhelms and when the temptation is to pack our bags or to fold, we must remember the crowds. I remember the guys down the rugby club. I think about the young people on our streets, the mums that come to our play group on Thursday mornings. Sheep without a shepherd. And so we must. And so where will Jesus' must take you? We had a very special visit a few months back from a choir from Mizoram in northeastern India. And wow, their story is incredible. It was Welsh Presbyterian missionaries, D.E. Jones of Llanderfel near Bala, completely ordinary people who knew Jesus' passion, who felt his compassion, who knew this invitation is too good to keep to ourselves and that there is too great a need. Therefore, we will go to the furthest, remotest parts of the world and take this news with us, that we will invite even the remotest, the Lushai Hills, these people, head-hunting tribes, and we will invite them to experience Jesus' kind of love. My own great-grandparents, my own Nain and Tide were born out in Aizawl in Mizoram, and I had the privilege then of inviting these people, former head-hunting tribe, now singing the Hallelujah. And they brought with them Welsh hymns, and their sound was heavenly. This is what Jesus' must does. It takes you to places you never would think you would go. But also, we must see Jesus' must takes us into tomorrow as well, doesn't it? You hear Eric Liddell's words, don't you? God made me for China. Well, he made you for wherever you are tomorrow. And the amazing thing is we do not go alone, do we? As the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you, Jesus says in John 20. Just as the Father sent the Son with his authority and with his presence, so the Son sends us with the same authority and the same promise that I will be with you to the very end of the age. Yes, we are safe, but we are safe for a purpose. Now, as we close our time together, I want to reference one other film, the film One Life. You might have seen it. It tells the story of Nicholas Winton, an ordinary man who went out pre-Nazi invasion in Czechoslovakia. And he saw the need. He saw the children on the streets who had no future, who had no hope. And he said to himself, he was broken, he was moved in the deepest part of him, who will do something. And so he did. And at the end of his life, the BBC invited him to a special programme. Now, he thought he was sitting in an ordinary audience, but the TV presenter got up on her feet and said, if anyone here in the audience owes their life to this man, Nicholas Winton, will you stand up? Now everyone stands up. 600 children, now with their own children, that could say, because of you, because of your compassion, we are here today. We have a hope and a future. Now, I imagine a similar room in heaven where we might be sat down one day, and I pray that there might be an audience that might be able to say, not because there's anything special, extraordinary about you, but because you embodied Jesus' passion, because you carried his compassion, because you were willing to go outside the fold to bring others in. I am here now with a hope and a future. Don't underestimate the power of one life, a life that is safe and safe for a purpose, a life of complete surrender. He is the Good Shepherd, and he is the one that will be with us and goes with us tomorrow and to the very end of the age.